Greetings, my lovelies. This is Blake here, and welcome to my review of The Legend of Tarzan. So, I am going to be experimenting with a new format for my videos, one which involves more scripting and editing, and depending on how difficult of a task this ends up being and how well received it is, this might just be how I do future reviews. So please let me know what you think. Depending on the reception, I might use this for upcoming Critiquing the Critics episodes. We'll just have to see. So I hope you enjoy the video. Based on the reviews, I was expecting The Legend of Tarzan to be The Legend of Hercules. I was sadly disappointed. Instead of seeing crap unfold on the screen, I actually saw something kind of good. That had been dismembered and its body parts rearranged in such a way that it became a shadow of its former self, but I saw something good, I think. I believe there is a decent movie in here, but it really feels like the studio enforced changes which compromised the picture. The storyline is unusually ambitious and complex, but it was designed for a 3-hour-long epic, so you can imagine how cramped it is within the confines of a 99-minute-long running time. I'm not even sure how to summarize this plot without revealing too much, but a lot of stuff happens, which constricts the narrative and ensures that it's unable to breathe. The Legend of Tarzan is a sequel to the story of Tarzan that we're more familiar with, as Tarzan has left his wild past behind him, has married Jane, and is now using his real name, John Clayton III. But he returns to the Congo because, insert convoluted plot here. The funny thing is, I actually thought the majority of this storyline was pretty compelling. I liked how the stakes progressively got bigger, and I enjoyed the majority of the character interactions. But every time the plot starts to build momentum, there will be an origins flashback that derailed the pacing, making the movie feel much longer than it really is. Many have contradicted this point, arguing that the flashbacks were the best part of The Legend of Tarzan, but they stopped the film dead in its tracks for me. Maybe it's because they're covering familiar territory, whereas the remainder of the plot is new, so naturally that's going to be more interesting to me. I don't believe they were originally intended to be flashbacks either, as they rarely have anything to do with what is happening in the present, often occur without warning, and sometimes won't even make any sense. One of Tarzan's flashbacks is even narrated by his deceased father, and he can apparently recall his old man's death that he wasn't even present for. So I refuse to believe that the original script packaged these scenes as flashbacks. Considering that the story of Tarzan has become famous within this film's universe, they could have easily had a character telling that story in the beginning of the movie, which would have given us the required backstory while not interrupting the flow of the remainder of the narrative. Although, for what it's worth, I'm not a big fan of storytelling that requires the extensive use of flashbacks. I really did not like it when Man of Steel did something similar, where throughout that entire film they were revealing bits and pieces of his origins. I can consider it to be superfluous, unnecessary, and they may as well just get that stuff over with as soon as possible. But at least in the case of Man of Steel, it felt like it had been planned from the beginning, that it was a creative decision, misguided as it was. In the case of The Legend of Tarzan, it really feels like this was not part of the original vision, which might be why it screws with the pacing so badly. I was afraid that based on the trailers, the film would strive for a bleak, dreary visual style, but luckily The Legend of Tarzan benefited from colorful cinematography that highlighted the beauty of the Congo. The special effects have been criticized by fellow reviewers, but I thought they mostly looked good. Maybe the Jungle Book spoiled the masses with its admittedly more convincing CGI and more eye-popping visuals, but I thought The Legend of Tarzan was fine in this area, and the action scenes were nicely done too. For all the problems The Legend of Tarzan has going against it, I don't believe the production values are amongst them. Another sign that the Legend of Tarzan was perhaps molested in the editing room is that they establish a character journey for Tarzan and then do absolutely nothing with it. In the beginning of the movie, he refuses to go by the name of Tarzan and wants nothing to do with his past. He reluctantly returns to the Congo, but has no difficulties reintegrating himself back into the wild and doesn't even struggle physically. No insecurities, internal conflicts, lesson learned. He just becomes a prop for the action scenes. Why bother setting this up if you're not even going to do anything with it? Well, unless Tarzan's development was removed in post. Samuel Jackson's sidekick character had a more complete arc than Tarzan. On the plus side, I really liked Alexander Skarsgård in the role, especially as he perfectly alternates between sophisticated and wild, with the animalistic mannerisms being a nice touch. Samuel Jackson was funny, and his chemistry with Skarsgård kept their developing relationship more interesting than the romance with Jane. Speaking of whom, fuck Margot Robbie's Jane. I hated this bitch so much. So goddamned much. Bitch. The film attempts to empower Jane, even though traditionally Jane is the damsel archetype. Nice idea, but all this amounts to is her struggling a bit, talking a lot of shit, and ultimately failing to escape on her own. That "like a damsel" line in response to Christoph Waltz demanding that she scream was a corny enough line, but the movie doesn't even earn it, as she is still a damsel in distress. Every time she tries to be proactive, it usually ends up in failure, and she needs to be rescued by the men in her life. So yes, bitch, like a damsel, scream. That is all you're fucking good at. At one point, she insinuates that Christoph Waltz was molested by his priest, and that is a horrific implication on its own, but Robbie's smug delivery somehow made this incarnation of Jane the most monstrous character in the entire fucking movie. Was I really supposed to laugh at that? I also love how smug she is when she's explaining how Tarzan killed the chief's son, although we later learn that the son was just a boy and Tarzan was very ashamed of it. Apparently, she thinks child abuse is okay, or at least amusing as long as it's the villains getting abused. Bitch. This was a badly written character, but Robbie's portrayal only magnified the problems here, and I usually really like the actress. Also, her relationship with Tarzan is substanceless because they don't have a lot of screen time together. I guess they just expected us to care based off our knowledge of the source material, and that is still shit writing regardless of how you look at it. Quite frankly, more time was spent on building up the relationship between Tarzan and Samuel L. Jackson, which does occasionally become very homoerotic.
Tarzan! Sucked on that warm black dingus.
Hey, I jip it. Christoph Waltz is another disappointment as he seems so bored. But the character might be another casualty of edits or rewrites because there are implications that there is more to him, but they never lead anywhere. Throughout most of the film, I kept thinking, why am I supposed to hate him? His henchmen seem cooler than he is, and the character just seems like he's dispassionately doing his job. They occasionally have to remind us that he's trying to enslave the country because it's easy to forget his dastardly plan, and a scene where he randomly shoots an ally of Tarzan was so out of character that I believe it was added in post just because the filmmakers realized they forgot to make him villainous. And he's not really sympathetic either, he's just there, and I wasn't ever sure how to react to him. So I believe The Legend of Tarzan was at one point a better movie, if not a legitimately good one, as it does have a lot of good stuff, but it must have been cropped down at some point, and the final product is very mediocre. I can't suggest you pursue this movie unless you're a Tarzan completist, or maybe if it's available for free on some platform and you're really bored. But if you do watch it, take solace in knowing that it's pretty easy to endure. I'd rate it a 5 out of 10, and I'd be very curious if an alternate cut ever becomes available because I'd love to experience the original vision. Or maybe I'm wrong and the writing was simply never very good to begin with, completely invalidating everything I've just said. I did not do a written review, but I have done written reviews of Lady Snowblood and The Shallows, so please read those. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. please let me know what you think about this possible new format. Should I continue doing it? Should I return to my traditional vlog style of reviewing? Please comment below, let me know. I was a little rusty when doing this, but it wasn't that difficult, and hopefully I'll get better in terms of delivering my lines more clearly, enunciating more, and so on. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I shall see you guys later.
Tarzan. Sucked on that warm black dingus.